episode 12 of Glitterstim ASMR, the Star Wars X-Wing Miniatures Game ASMR channel. My name is Andy Myers. In today's episode, we'll continue the X-Wing Sacred Texts series with the Tournament Regulations document from Fantasy Flight Games, published in October of 2018. While FFG is no longer in charge of X-Wing, this is still the standard document until Atomic Mass Games publishes their own. No collusion, no final salvo instead of playing, just ASMR brain tingles and somewhat outdated rules. Enjoy! Star Wars X-Wing Tournament Regulations Version 1.0, effective October 1st, 2018. Summary of changes in this version. All changes and additions made to this document since the previous version are marked in red. Tournaments supported by the Organized Play OP program for X-Wing, sponsored by Fantasy Flight Games, FFG, and its international partners, follow the rules provided in this document. Introduction. A tournament is a competition between X-Wing players. After enrolling in a tournament, competitors are paired against one another in an organized fashion to play a game. After multiple games against different opponents, players are ranked according to their performance. Most tournaments conclude with the awarding of prizes to top finishers. Tournaments are played using the rules provided in the most recent version of the X-Wing rules reference and this document, both of which can be downloaded from xwing.com. This document explains important tournament concepts and provides the details for standard play tournaments, which use squad building rules that mandate a 200-point maximum for squads. There are multiple game modes available that designate specific pools of ship cards and upgrade cards to choose from when building squads. When running an event using a specific variant or game mode, please also read any related rules, documents, event outlines, or information in the X-Wing Squad Builder to learn any important differences. Table of Contents. 1. Tournament Participant Roles. 1. Organizer. 2. Marshal. 3. Judge. 4. Player. 5. Spectator. 6. Leader participation. 7. Conduct. A. Unsporting conduct. 2. Tournament materials. 1. Organizer materials. A. Game mats. 2. Player materials. A. Squad building. B. Squad lists. C. Multiple faction ships. D. Essential and non-essential components. A. Cards. B. Indicators. C. Objects. D. Tools. 3. Sharing components. 4. Component modifications. 5. Lost and damaged components. 6. Legal products and substitutions. 3. Tournament play. 1. Tournament setup. 2. Game setup. 3. Damage cards. 4. Destroyed ships. 5. Margin of error. 6. Missed opportunities. 7. Taking notes and outside material. 8. Fortressing. 4. Tournament concepts. 1. Tournament round times. 2. Pairings. A. Swiss rounds. B. Progression cut. C. Single elimination rounds. 3. End of round. A. Calculating a player's score. B. Final salvo. 4. Tournament points. A. Margin of victory. B. Tiebreakers. 5. Tournament structures. 1. Basic structure. 2. Advanced structure. 3. Custom structure. 4. Tournament tiers. 1. Relaxed. 2. Formal. 3. Premier. Tournament participation roles. Every person present at a tournament is a participant. Participants fulfill specific roles based on their responsibilities to the tournament. All participants share the responsibility of acting in a respectful manner toward one another. Please read the fundamental event document for a detailed explanation of these roles. Participant leader roles are organizer, marshal, and judge. Other roles include player and spectator. Organizer. An event must have exactly one organizer. The organizer is responsible for the oversight of the entire event, including both planning and execution. If the organizer does not assign a marshal for the event, the organizer must also perform all responsibilities of the marshal role as needed. Marshal. An event may have any number of marshals, including none. A marshal is an expert on the game's rules and regulations and provides final determinations for matters of rules interpretation. When a marshal is not actively performing the role's duties, that person is a spectator and should communicate this change in status clearly. A marshal also determines if unsporting conduct has occurred and what the appropriate remedy is, referring any recommendations for disqualification to the organizer. Judge. An event may have any number of judges, including none. A judge is well versed in the game's rules and regulations. A judge's responsibilities include assisting players to resolve disputes and answering questions regarding the game's rules. When a judge is not actively performing judge duties, that person is a spectator and should communicate this change in status clearly. When a judge is observing a game or an issue is brought to the judge's attention, the judge should inform players when they are not following the game rules. Players have an initial opportunity to resolve any situation among themselves, but any player may alternatively ask the judge to make a ruling. If a marshal is present at an event, a player may ask a judge or the organizer to have a marshal review a ruling or otherwise provide a final determination on matters of rules. Player. A player is an individual that plays X-Wing at the event. A player must bring all components they need to play a game of X-Wing. When a player is not actively engaged in a game of X-Wing, that person is a spectator. Spectator. A spectator is any individual physically at a tournament not actively engaging in another role. Spectators must not disturb an ongoing game and cannot provide any input or assistance to players during their game. If a spectator believes they have witnessed a breach of the rules in a game they are watching, a spectator may bring it to the attention of a leader. Note that a missed opportunity, see page 5, does not constitute a breach in the rules, and spectators should not comment on missed opportunities. Leader participation. A leader may participate as a player in a relaxed tier tournament for which that leader is responsible only if there is at least one other leader present. Additional leaders must be announced at the beginning of the tournament and are responsible for all rulings for games in which the first leader is playing. If two leaders play one another, the marshal is responsible for any rulings during the game. During formal and premier tier tournaments, leaders cannot participate as players. Leaders for formal and premier tournaments are expected to commit their full attention to overseeing the event. Conduct. All tournament participants are expected to act in a respectful manner during a tournament. If players have a dispute during a competition and cannot resolve it themselves, they must call for a judge to resolve it and provide any rulings that are needed. All card interpretations during a tournament are the responsibility of a marshal, and a marshal may overrule the rules documents when an error is discovered. Unsporting conduct. Players are expected to behave in a mature and considerate manner and to play within the rules and not abuse them. This prohibits intentionally stalling a game for time, such as by slow play or by fortressing, as described on page 5, placing components with excessive force, inappropriate behavior, treating an opponent with a lack of courtesy or respect, cheating, etc. Collusion among players to manipulate scoring is expressly forbidden. The organizer, at their sole discretion, may remove players from the tournament for unsporting conduct. Tournament materials. There are many materials and game components needed to facilitate a tournament. The organizer and players are both responsible for supplying certain items. Organizer materials. In addition to arranging a location, the organizer is responsible for securing tables that can hold a 3-foot by 3-foot play surface for each game of 2 players, as well as chairs. While the organizer can mark the required play area on a table with tape or another simple method, providing game mats or a similar material in a 3-foot by 3-foot dimensions is strongly recommended. The organizer should have table numbers on hand or some other method of demarcation so players can easily find their seats at the beginning of each tournament round. The organizer is responsible for having blank squad lists and pens available if they are required for the event. Finally, the organizer is also responsible for having all required rules documents on hand for reference during the event. This includes the most up-to-date version of the X-Wing Rules Reference, X-Wing Tournament Regulations, this document, and any event outline or other document relevant to the event. Most of these documents can be found on the X-Wing website. Game mats. In events where players provide their own game mats, only official FFG X-Wing game mats, including official prize game mats given out at select events, are allowed. This is to guarantee a consistent experience for all players and prevent any advantage players may gain from familiarity with a particular game mat that is not widely available. FFG game mats are widely available for examination and play. If a venue provides game mats for their event, they may use third-party game mats. Players may replace third-party game mats if they provide their own FFG game mat to use. Player materials. Players are responsible for bringing all of the game components required to play a game of X-Wing. This includes all ship miniatures, plastic bases, bags, ship cards, ship bases, upgrade cards, tokens, charges, and markers. In addition, they must bring a damage deck, sufficient dice for attack and defense rolls, a full set of maneuver templates, and a range ruler. When a squad list is required, players should bring a completed list with half points noted for each ship, or arrive at the venue early to fill one out. Squad building. Each player must bring one squad to use in a tournament. A squad cannot exceed 200 points, though it may contain fewer than 200 points. legal squad list contains between 2 and 8 ships from a single faction. Each player must include exactly 3 unique obstacles of their choice in their squad. Players must select these obstacles from the asteroids and debris clouds available from official X-Wing products, including first edition products, except those found in epic expansions. A player may not select 2 of the same obstacle. Players must use the same squad and obstacles for the duration of the tournament. Squad lists. Some events require players to submit a squad list including their name, ships in their squad, all associated upgrade cards, total squad points, damage deck, and obstacles to the organizer before the start of the tournament. If a player uses a ship card with the same name as a different ship card available to that faction, that player must uniquely identify the ship card by providing its ship type and subtitle in parentheses. For example, Ezra Bridger, TIE-LN Fighter, Spectre 6. If a player uses an upgrade card with the same name as a different upgrade card available to that faction, that player must uniquely identify that card, such as by including the upgrade slot in parentheses, for example, R2-D2, parentheses, astromech, in parentheses. If a leader discovers a player's squad list is missing appropriate information, that leader should find that player immediately and update the squad list based on the components the player is using. If this would result in a significant and potentially advantageous change, the leader should consider investigating for possible cheating. Multiple faction ships. All ship cards and ship bases in a player's squad must belong to the same faction. If a player's ship has different versions in more than one faction, the player may use any version of the miniature and dial that match the full ship name when assembling a squad. All dials must be from 2nd edition. Plastic dial backs from the premium maneuver dial kit may be used. Multiple ship example. Scott is fielding a Scum and Villainy squad that has 2 BTL A4 Y-Wings. One of his BTL A4 Y-Wing miniatures and one of his BTL A4 Y-Wing dials is from the 2nd edition BTL A4 Y-Wing expansion. The other BTL A4 Y-Wing miniature is from the 1st edition Most Wanted expansion, and the other dial is from the 2nd edition Scum and Villainy conversion kit. However, all of his ship cards and ship bases are from the Scum and Villainy faction. Essential and non-essential components. There are 2 types of components in X-Wing: essential components and non-essential components. Both essential and non-essential components are required for play, but there are much more specific restrictions on what can be used to replace or modify essential components. Essential components are components for which only specific substitutions outlined in this document are allowed. These include objects, see page 3, and tools, see page 4. Non-essential components are components for which substitutions are generally allowed, as long as they are appropriate and clear in purpose. These include indicators, see page 3. A number of examples are given in this document. In cases of uncertainty, a marshal makes the final determination whether a given indicator is appropriate and clear in purpose. Types of components. The following are various types of components. Cards. Essential. Cards such as ship and upgrade cards are considered essential components. See page 4. A player must have all cards required for their list including the suitable number of copies of any cards used multiple times. Proxies of cards are not allowed unless used under the rules of lost and damaged components on page 4. Indicators, non-essential. Indicators, including tokens, markers, and charges, are representations of information about the game or game state for which punchboard is provided in the relevant ship expansion. Indicators may also be used to represent multiple tokens or markers or other open or derived information. They are required for play, but are considered non-essential components. See page 4. Indicators are considered non-essential components. Their information must be expressed, but players may use appropriate substitutes. Typically, players use the tokens, charges, markers, and turret arc indicators included in official product as indicators. However, players may choose to use other items as indicators, so long as they do not obscure significant component information, are resistant to accidental modification, and their purpose of use is clear to both players. The marshal is responsible for determining the legality of an indicator and its reasonable usage during a match if objected to by its owner's opponent. The following are types of indicators. Tokens. Tokens are circular and square indicators that represent resources or temporary changes in game state for a single ship. They are placed in the play area next to the ship they affect. Markers. Markers are indicators that represent changes in game state for a single object or indicate its position. Some are hexagonal, but others are not. Markers are placed in the play area next to the object they affect. Shields and charges. Shields and charges are indicators with two states, an active state and an inactive state. These two states must be differentiable by an opponent across the table. Shields and charges are placed next to the specific card to which they pertain. There are two types of charges, standard charges and force charges. For the shields and charges provided in products, they are the side with the circular border, active, and the red side without the circle border, inactive. First edition shields may be used, but a player must mark one side in some manner that clearly indicates whether the shield is active or lost. Turret arc indicators. Single turret arc indicators are circular rings with a pointer that indicates a single direction. Double turret arc indicators have two pointers that indicate opposite directions. Turret arc indicators are placed on the ship base over the plastic circle in the center of the base. A turret arc indicator, single or double, based on the matching icon on the ship or upgrade card, must clearly indicate which arc or arcs on the ship's base the turret currently occupies. For the first edition VCX 100, because the peg does not accommodate a turret arc indicator, a player should place a small single turret indicator on the punchboard inside the arc the turret occupies. Ship IDs. Ship IDs are numbered pieces of punchboard that are placed in the ship base, fitting into the slots in front of and behind the plastic bag, above the turret arc indicator if one is present. Players must identify all ships in their squad with a unique ship ID. A corresponding ID indicator must be placed on the ship card. This ID's number must also correspond to the ship's lock tokens. The provided ship IDs have black and white sides so that players can indicate which ships are their own. Players may use a marker to color the white side to any color as long as it is consistent across all ships. The number is readable, and it is distinguishable from the black side of the ID. All of a player's ships must be identifiable as part of their list by their IDs. Players may also make their own ship IDs and locks, so long as the IDs fit within the slot on the base and clearly correspond the locks. Objects essential. Objects are punch boards such as ship bases, obstacles, and devices. These are considered essential components, see page 4, and players must bring them in the quantity their list requires. Players may use any obstacle punchboard, asteroids, and debris clouds from 1st edition or 2nd edition. Players may use device punchboard, bombs and mines from 1st edition that exist in 2nd edition. Tools essential. Tools are punch boards such as the maneuver templates and the range rulers. These are considered essential components, see page 5, and players must bring them in the quantity their list requires. Legal products and substitutions. Players must use only official X-Wing components in tournament play, with the following exceptions for third-party replacements, so long as they clearly convey the information required. Non-essential components, such as indicators, see indicators on page 4. Range rulers that match the dimensions of an official range ruler or a particular section of an official range ruler. Maneuver templates that match the dimensions of official maneuver templates. Note that players must have a set of maneuver templates with the center line available to resolve certain maneuvers and actions, such as the Talon roll maneuvers or barrel roll action. With their opponent's permission, however, they may use other non-official maneuver templates that match the dimensions of official maneuver templates without a center line for movement that does not require the center line. Determining the legality of any questionable third-party tokens, range rulers, and maneuver templates is the Marshal's responsibility. Proxies of cards are not allowed unless used under the rules of lost and damaged components on page 5. Components can be modified only as described under component modifications on page 5 and under types of components on page 4. If a player uses the Star Wars Dice app, the device with the app must be displayed in full view of both players at all times, and the opponent may request to share the app. All X-Wing 1st edition and 2nd edition non-essential components are legal for standard play tournaments, including official promotional indicators like tokens and other components given out at events or tournaments, unless the specific game mode being utilized does not allow them. For more information about which products are allowed for which game modes, please refer to the official X-Wing Squad Builder. All X-Wing 2nd Edition essential components are legal for standard play, including official promotional tools such as maneuver tools. Custom setup templates designed to aid players in ship deployment and other custom-made tools are not allowed. Players can use only their range rulers and maneuver templates within range 1 of that player's edge to help them set up formations during deployment. For relaxed and formal events, all product is legal in North America upon the product's official release. For premier events, all product is legal in North America 11 days, typically the second Monday after the product's official release. Official dates will be updated on the product legality page on our website, fantasyflightgames.com/ SW. Players outside North America should check with their organizer to determine which products are tournament legal. Please also remember that certain game modes and variants may limit the ship cards and upgrade cards which are available for use in a given event. Sharing components. Before or during a tournament round, any player may request that a single range ruler or set of range rulers, a set of maneuver templates, and/or set of dice be shared for the duration of the round. Any decisions are subject to review by a marshal. The marshal may mandate that players must share a single range ruler, set of maneuver templates, and/or set of dice during a round. Component modifications. During tournament play, each player is required to use the components included in official X-Wing products. See legal products and substitutions on page 5. Questions about a component's eligibility should be directed to a marshal. If a necessary component is ruled ineligible and the player cannot locate a replacement for it, that player is dropped from the tournament. Players are welcome and encouraged to personalize their squads according to the following rules. Players may paint their ship miniatures. They cannot modify a ship miniature in any way that would create confusion about which ship the miniature represents. Players cannot modify ship bases to alter their size or shape. They may add weight to a ship base if it does not alter the shape of the base. Ship pegs, including the connecting pegs affixed to ship miniatures, may be modified or replaced with a different connecting method. Cards must remain unaltered, though they may be sleeved for protection. Sleeves for damaged cards must be identical and unaltered. Players may mark their ship bases, tokens, markers, indicators, and their maneuver dials to indicate ownership or denote the color of maneuvers, as long as the function of the component is not compromised. However, players should be careful not to mark their maneuver dials in any way that may indicate to their opponents what maneuvers they have selected. Players may mark their asteroids, debris fields, and bomb tokens to indicate ownership, but cannot otherwise alter them in any way. Players may mark dice with a permanent or indelible marker to indicate ownership in an unobtrusive manner, but cannot otherwise alter them in any way. If two or more miniatures in play could potentially touch, causing conflict with movement or placement of ships. For example, 2 modified YT-1300 ships are placed with their bases touching. Players must adjust the number of plastic pegs to increase or decrease height until the ship miniatures are not touching. Lost and damaged components. If a player loses a component during a tournament, that player has an opportunity to find a replacement if necessary. Any player that discovers they are missing an essential component at the beginning of or during a round should notify a leader. The leader will give the player a short time extension to their game in order to find a replacement. If the player cannot find a replacement within that time, they must concede the game. If the player is unable to find a replacement by the start of the next round, they should be removed from the tournament. If an essential component becomes damaged during the course of a tournament, the player has an opportunity to find a replacement. If the player cannot find a replacement, the damaged component is treated as lost unless it falls within one of the following categories. Damaged card. The player keeps the original card near the rest of their squad and uses a proxy card in its place for the remainder of the tournament. A leader will create their proxy, including the card name, any information that is no longer legible or available on the damaged card, the name of the leader who created it, and the date it was and abides by the rules under component modifications on page 5. If the miniature does impede play, the player keeps the miniature near the rest of their squad for the remainder of the tournament. Damaged dice, range ruler, or maneuver template. The player keeps the original component near the rest of their squad and requests to share the opponent's component for each remaining round of the tournament. Tournament play. This section provides information and considerations for playing a game of X-Wing at a tournament. Tournament setup. Before the tournament begins, the organizer must set up tables suitable for tournament play. Each table must contain a 3-foot by 3-foot square play area with clearly delineated edges. Players should have enough space on the table to comfortably place all of the components necessary for their squads. In addition, the organizer should clearly communicate the details of the event to players ahead of time, including the event's date, start time, and game modes utilized. Game setup. The following steps must be performed before players can begin their game each tournament round. 1. Each player places their squad outside of the 3-foot by 3-foot play area next to their assigned player edge. 2. Both players reveal all components in their squads and assign ID indicators to all ships. If playing with the default components, one player must display only the white numerals of their ID tokens. The other player must display only the black numerals. If both players already set the same color, the player should flip a coin or otherwise determine randomly which player must switch their indicators to the other side. If playing with colored-in IDs or appropriate substitutions, each player's ships must be differentiable from their opponents. Prior to the first round of a tournament, the marshal may mandate that each player manually verify their opponent's squad point total. 3. Each player may request to examine their opponent's damage deck to validate its contents. Each player shuffles their damage deck thoroughly and presents it to their opponent. The opponent may shuffle and cut the deck if desired. Players cannot share a damage deck. 4. Players determine player order. The player with the lowest squad point total decides which player is the first player. If both players are tied with the same squad point total, players must use a method to determine a player at random, such as flipping a coin. The winner decides who is first player. 5. Each player places their 3 obstacle tokens next to the play area to form a pool of 6 obstacles. The first player chooses one of these obstacles and places it into the play area. Then the other player chooses one of the remaining obstacles and places it into the play area. The players continue to alternate until all 6 obstacles have been placed. An obstacle cannot be placed at range 0 to 2 of any edge of the play area or at range 0 to 1 of another obstacle. 6. Players place their ships in ascending initiative order from lowest to highest initiative, using player order as a tiebreaker. Ships must be placed within range 1 of their player edge. Each time a ship with a turret arc indicator is placed, the player rotates the arc to select a legal standard arc. 7. Players prepare any additional special components they may need. Once players complete the steps above, they must wait for a leader to announce the start of the round before beginning their game. If the round has already begun, players may begin playing immediately upon completing these steps. Damage cards. When a player's ship is dealt a damage card, the card is taken from that player's damage deck. Players must maintain their own requests to examine their opponent's damage deck to validate its contents. A marshal or judge may check damage decks at any time. Removed ships. To facilitate calculating a player's score when a game ends, see Calculating a Player's Score on page 8. Each player should keep their ship and upgrade cards organized even after a ship is removed due to being destroyed or fleeing the battlefield. When a ship is removed in this way, the owner of the ship places the corresponding ship miniature on the card. Each player's destroyed ships, lost shields, lost charges, and discarded damage cards are open information. Ships in reserve at the end of a game are not considered removed and count as if they are in play for the purposes of scoring. Margin of error. Ships are sometimes moved accidentally or placed inexactly during the normal course of the game. A small margin of error is allowed in the position and orientation of ships in these situations so that the pace of the game is not unnecessarily affected. Players must not abuse this margin of error, and they must use the components included with the game to be as accurate as possible. Using excessive force when placing components to intentionally move other components is expressly forbidden. In the event of a dispute, players should call a judge for assistance. Missed opportunities. Players are expected to follow the game's rules, remembering to perform actions and use card effects when indicated. It is each player's responsibility to maintain a proper game state and to ensure that all mandatory abilities and game steps are acknowledged. If a player forgets to use an effect during the timing specified by that effect, that player cannot retroactively use it without the consent of their opponent. Players are expected to act with respect and not intentionally distract or rush an opponent with the intent of forcing a missed opportunity. Taking notes and outside material. Players cannot take notes or reference outside material or information during a tournament round. However, players may reference official rule documents or game components that do not contain hidden information at any time, or ask a judge for clarification from official rules documents. Official rules documents include all rules documents and inserts available on the X-Wing page of our website, the official X-Wing squad builder, those found in an X-Wing product, or any portion thereof. Fortressing. Fortressing is conduct violation relating to a game state in which one or both players are using the rules for overlapping ships to prevent the movement of their own ships. It is considered a form of stalling, as it seeks to create and exploit a stalemate. The act of fortressing can only be determined by a marshal. At the end of any activation phase, a player may request that a leader check their opponent's ships for fortressing. If the leader confirms that the criteria are met, a marshal then makes the determination whether or not player is fortressing. The criteria in the game state for fortressing are as follows. Due to the maneuvers that a player has selected, all of that player's ships have overlapped one another in such a manner that none have changed positions on the board for 2 or more consecutive rounds. That player could have selected movers that did not result in the same game state. If the leader determines that these criteria are not met, they should inform the players and consider the matter resolved. If the leader confirms that the situation fits the above criteria, they should call for a marshal to deliver a final ruling. If the marshal determines that a player is trying to use fortressing to their advantage, they should inform the player of this fact and instruct that player to plot maneuvers that end the fortressing board state. If the player fails to do so, at the end of the next activation phase, all of their ships are destroyed and the game ends. Alternately, if the marshal determines that a player has reached this state unintentionally, they should privately ensure the player is aware of maneuvers they can select to free their ships from the collision. If the player then fails to select to free their ships at the end of the next activation phase, their opponent may again request the leader check for fortressing. Players should not request a check for fortressing unless the above criteria are met, as repeatedly doing so could be considered unsporting conduct. Tournament concepts. The tournament concepts together create the framework for any X-Wing tournament. Tournament round times. Each tournament round of X-Wing is a predetermined length, giving players a certain amount of time to complete their games. A leader should start the timer for a tournament round after most players have found their seats and begun to set up. If a game has not concluded when the time for a tournament round runs out, the players finish the current game round and then calculate their scores. See end of round on page 8. A tournament round's length varies depending on the type of round. A leader should announce the start, midpoint, and end of a round. Swiss rounds, 75 minutes each. Single elimination rounds, except final, 75 minutes each. Final single elimination round, 120 minutes. Pairings. Each tournament round, players are paired with an opponent against whom they play a game of X-Wing. The method of pairing may change based on what type of rounds are being used. The organizer must announce the number and types of rounds and what size any progression cuts will be before the start of the tournament. When necessary, a player may be assigned a bye instead of being paired against an opponent. That player receives a win with a margin of victory of 300 for that round of the tournament. The rules for when to assign a bye to a player are detailed in the relevant sections below. Players should not be paired against the same opponent more than once during a single stage of a tournament. In general, a single stage of a tournament ends when a progression cut is made. Players can leave a tournament early in several ways. If a player no longer wishes to continue playing, that player must notify the organizer of their intent. The organizer will avoid pairing that player in future rounds by dropping them from the tournament. Players must notify the organizer of their intent to drop as soon as possible, and the organizer may apply penalties to players who fail to do so, such as withholding prizes at their discretion. Players are also dropped if they do not appear within a reasonable time limit for a round in which they are paired, or if they are no longer able to play for another reason. Players can request that the organizer allow them to rejoin an event from which they were dropped, being assigned an unpaired loss for each round they did not attend. Disqualified players are removed from the tournament and cannot rejoin. Swiss rounds. Most X-Wing tournaments use a Swiss pairing system that awards tournament points to the winner of each game. Each Swiss round pairs players in a head-to-head games, attempting to match players with the same number of tournament points together while preventing players from playing the same opponent more than once. At the end of Swiss rounds, the winner of the tournament is the player with the most tournament points, unless there are single elimination rounds. See single elimination rounds on page 7. For the first round of Swiss pairings, players are matched randomly against an opponent. For each round after the first, players are paired at random against another player with the same number of tournament points. To determine pairings, take the group of players with the most tournament points and pair them at random. If there is an odd number of players in that group, pair the remaining players with a random player from the group of players with the next most tournament points. Then pair all remaining players in the second group at random. Continue this until all players are paired. If there is an odd number of players in the tournament, a player at random receives the bye in the first round. In later rounds, if there is an odd number of players remaining in the tournament, the bye is given to the lowest ranked player who has not yet received a bye. When a player receives a bye, that player receives a win and a margin of victory of 300. See margin of victory on page 8. Pairing example. John, Stella, and Laramie all have 5 tournament points, the most out of any player in the tournament. Kyle is the next highest ranked player and the only player with 4 tournament points. John is paired against Stella. Because there are no other players with 5 tournament points, Laramie is paired against Kyle. Progression cut. Many X-Wing tournaments set a predetermined number of rounds, at the end of which all players that meet certain performance criteria advance to the next stage of the tournament, and all other players are dropped. This is commonly referred to as making a cut, and is often accompanied by a change in the type of tournament rounds and the start of a new stage in the tournament. These tournament regulations cover the type of cut used for the basic and advanced tournament structures. A standings-based cut to the top 4, 8, 16, or 32 players. There are additional types of progression cuts detailed in the fundamental event document found on the X-Wing page of the FFG website. If a player who qualified for a standings-based cut drops from the tournament before any games are played during the next stage of the tournament, the next highest ranking player should be added to the cut as the lowest ranked player in the cut, unless the progression cut is scheduled on a later day. Player drop example. Stephen finishes the Swiss rounds of a tournament in 6th place and makes the top 8 cut, but has a family emergency come up before the single elimination rounds begin. He informs the organizer that he must leave the tournament and then departs. The organizer immediately calls over the 9th place player, Eve, and informs her that she may play in the top 8 due to someone leaving. She accepts and is entered into the top 8 as 8th place. The former 8th place player moves to 7th place, and the former 7th place player moves to Stephen's spot at 6th place. Then the organizer pairs all 8 players based on these new rankings. Single elimination rounds. Many X-Wing tournaments use single elimination rounds in which the winner of each pairing remains in the tournament and the losing player is eliminated and dropped from the tournament. Elimination rounds are usually used after a progression cut to the top 4, 8, 16, or 32 players and continue until only one player remains and is named the winner. For the first round of single elimination that follows a progression cut, pair the highest ranked player against the lowest ranked player who made the cut. This is game number 1. Pair the second highest player against the second lowest player who made the cut. This is game number 2. Continue in this manner until all players are paired. For tournaments which begin with single elimination rounds, buys will need to be utilized for the first round if there are a number of players not equal to an exponential power of 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, and so on. Randomly assign buys to a number of players equal to the difference between the actual player count and the next highest highest number. This pairing is the new Game 1. If there are more than 2 players remaining, pair the winner of game number 2 against the winner of the second to last pairing, the game with the second highest number. This pairing is the new game number 2. Continue in this manner until all players are paired for the round. In further single elimination rounds, follow the same method until all players are paired. If a player drops from the tournament after single elimination rounds begin, that player's current opponent or next opponent, if the player drops between rounds, receives a bye for the round. End of round. Each tournament round ends in one of the following ways. One player defeated. At the end of a game round, all of one player's ships have been removed by being destroyed or fleeing the battlefield. The player with at least one ship remaining immediately earns a win, and the opposing player receives a loss. Mutual destruction. At the end of a game round, all of both players' ships are destroyed. Players follow the rules for final salvo below, using all of their ships to determine the winner. Time. At the end of a game round, the round time limit has been reached. If time is called during a game round, players must finish that game round. The player with the greater score receives a win and the opponent receives a loss. If both players have the same score, they follow the rules for final salvo below to determine the winner. Concession. A player voluntarily concedes defeat at any point during the game. All of that player's ships are destroyed. The conceding player receives a loss and the opponent receives a win. Remember that collusion among players to manipulate scoring is forbidden, and the score should still be calculated based on the final game state, including the winner's destroyed and damaged ships. See Unsporting Conduct on page 3. Going to time example. Sal and Elaine are in the middle of the activation phase when the round time limit is reached. They finish the game round through the end phase and then add up their scores. Elaine destroyed 77 points of Sal's squad, while Sal destroyed 49 points of Elaine's squad. Elaine has the higher score, so she receives the win and a margin of victory of 2-8. Sal receives a loss and a margin of victory of 172. Calculating a player's score. A player's score helps determine who won the game in certain circumstances and is used to calculate margin of victory. See margin of victory on page 8. Each player calculates their score by adding together the total squad point value of their opponent's destroyed ships, including upgrade cards equipped to those ships. In addition, each player receives half the total squad point value, including upgrade cards, rounded up, of each enemy ship whose health, combined total hull and shields, including any modifications to hull or shields via cards such as hull upgrade or shield upgrade, has been reduced to half or below. If a player destroys all of the opponent's ships, the opponent's squad is worth 200 squad points for the purposes of calculating score, even if the total ship and upgrade cards are worth fewer squad points. If a player concedes the game, all of that player's remaining ships are destroyed and removed before calculating each player's score. Half-point example. Han Solo has no shields remaining and 2 face-down damage cards assigned to him. He has 7 lost health, which is more than half of his 13 available health, so he is worth half his total squad point value, including equipped upgrade cards, rounded up. Final salvo. If both players have the same score at the end of a game, they must fire a final salvo to determine the winner. To fire a final salvo, each player adds together the highest printed points. Players earn tournament points at the end of each round. At the end of a tournament, the player with the most tournament points wins the tournament. In the case of a larger event, they are instead used to determine who makes the cut to elimination rounds. Players earn tournament points as follows. Win equals 1 tournament point. Loss equals 0 tournament points. Margin of victory. At the end of each game, the player with the higher score adds the amount by which their score exceeds the opponent's score to 200. This number is that player's margin of victory, MOV. The player who has destroyed fewer squad points subtracts the same amount from 200 to determine their margin of victory. End of game example. Bradley wins the game, destroying his opponent's entire squad, 200 squad points. Bradley's opponent, Kara, has destroyed 24 points of Bradley's ships. Bradley wins by 176 points, which he adds to 200 for an MOV of 376. Kara loses by 176 points, which she subtracts from 200 for an MOV of 24. If both players have an identical score, each player receives a margin of victory of 200. When a player receives a bye, that player receives a margin of victory of 300. Tiebreakers. If 2 or more players have the same number of tournament points, tiebreakers are used to determine each player's standing within that group. Tiebreakers are used in the following order until all players within that group have been given a standing. Margin of victory. The player with the highest cumulative margin of victory is ranked above all other players with the same number of tournament points. The player with the second highest cumulative margin of victory is ranked second among those players, and so on. Strength of schedule. A player's strength of schedule is calculated by dividing each opponent's total tournament points by the number of rounds that opponent has played, adding the results of each opponent played, and then dividing that total by the number of opponents the player has played. The player with the highest strength of schedule is ranked above all other players in the group not yet ranked. The player with the second highest strength of schedule is ranked second among all players in the group not yet ranked, and so on. Random. If any players are still tied after all other tiebreakers have been applied, then those players are ranked in a random order below any players already ranked in the group. Tournament structures. The structure of a tournament determines how many Swiss and single elimination rounds are used. All X-Wing tournaments must use one of the following 3 types. Basic structure. The basic tournament structure is designed to be very accessible, especially for newer participants. This structure provides a tournament experience that requires a modest commitment of time and resources from organizers and players. The basic structure is used for wave championship level events. Number of registered players, number of Swiss rounds, size of cut. 4 to 8 players, 3 Swiss rounds, no cut. 9 to 16 players, 4 rounds of Swiss, no cut. 17 to 24 players, 4 rounds of Swiss, top cut of 4. 25 to 40 players, 5 rounds of Swiss, top 4 cut. 41 to 44 players, 5 rounds of Swiss, top 8 cut. 45 to 76 players, 6 Swiss rounds, top 8 cut. 77 to 148 players, 6 rounds of Swiss, top 16 cut. 149 and above players, 7 Swiss rounds, top 16 cut. Advanced structure. The advanced tournament structure caters to participants that enjoy competition. This structure provides a robust tournament experience that requires a substantial commitment of time and resources from organizers and players. The advanced structure is used for hyperspace trial level events. Number of registered players, number of Swiss rounds, size of cut. 9 to 12 players, 4 rounds of Swiss, top 4 cut. 13 to 24 players, 4 rounds of Swiss, top 8 cut. 25 to 40 players, 5 rounds of Swiss, top 8 cut. 41 to 76 players, 6 rounds of Swiss, top 8 cut. 77 to 148 players, 6 Swiss rounds, top 16 cut. 149 to 288 players, 6 rounds of Swiss, top 32 cut. 289 to 512 players, 7 rounds of Swiss, top 32 cut. 513 and above players, 8 rounds of Swiss, top 32 cut. Custom structure. The custom structure applies to all round structures other than the basic and advanced structures. Also included in the custom structure are tournaments that offer a number of rounds or size of cut that does not change based on attendance. The event outline of official custom tournaments will either include a specific structure tailored to that particular type of event, or instruct the organizer to design a structure and communicate it to participants. The custom structure is used for official premier events such as Hyperspace Cup and World Championship events. Tournament tiers. FFG's OP events are broken into 3 tiers of play. These tiers serve to establish the expectations of an X-Wing tournament. Expectations are not intended to exclude people from participating, but to communicate the experience that players can expect from an event. Organizers of unofficial tournaments are encouraged to utilize the relaxed tier unless their tournament is specifically aimed at competitive players. Relaxed tournaments at this level are welcoming to all players, regardless of experience level. Players are encouraged to help each other improve and learn, so long as it does not significantly disrupt the game. The focus is on creating a fun and friendly environment. The relaxed tier is used for Wave Championship level events. Formal. This tournament level expects players to possess at least a minimal amount of experience. Players should be familiar with the game rules and be prepared to exercise that knowledge to play at a reasonable pace. Players are expected to avoid bumping ships and refrain from other sloppy play mistakes. The focus is a friendly, competitive environment. The formal tier is used for hyperspace trial level events. Premier events are the highest level of competition for Fantasy Flight Games tournaments, such as Hyperspace Cup, System Open, and World Championship level events. At this top level of tournaments, players are expected to have a moderate amount of experience. Players should be familiar with not only the game rules, but also the most recent FAQ and tournament regulations. The focus is on a competitive and fair environment. This and other supported documents for X-Wing can be accessed from the games page on fantasyflightgames.com/Star Wars OP. Permission granted to print or photocopy for personal use. Copyright and trademark Lucasfilm Limited. The FFG logo is registered of Fantasy Flight Games. I hope the tournament parameters laid out in this document inspire all of you new players to attend your first event, and to you veteran players to organize your own community tournaments. If you're putting together a custom tournament and there's a crazy list building idea you have, use these regulations to inspire confidence and declare to the world, I will make it legal. If you like this content or appreciate the absurdist creative humor, please like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Then head to www.patreon.com/GlitterstimASMR and sign up to be on the Jedi Council to offer your ideas for future episodes of this ridiculous project. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.